Hello guys, welcome back to the channel for the third and final part in my Fenix A321 series for Microsoft Flight Simulator. And today we're completing our flight from Nice to Frankfurt, and we'll be covering our descent, approach and landing. And I'll pop links to parts 1 and 2 in the description below so you can check those out too. So, we're currently in our cruise over Germany at 36,000 feet, approaching our top of descent, so let's hop inside the flight deck and get started. Okay, so we can see on our nav display we're approaching our top of descent, so let's brief our arrival. And we're flying the MPAX 5 Bravo arrival, so we'll be at flight level 360 at MPAX, making our way all the way down to Adnis, just zoom in a little bit, where we need to be at 10,000 feet. And there is a published hold at Speza if required, before turning left 283 degrees to Frankfurt 606, then turning right 359 degrees to Frankfurt 610, and then we have a series of waypoints all the way out to Frankfurt 616, followed by vectors, which we will look at in a bit more detail later. Okay, I'm going to put 10,000 feet as our target altitude, just so we make that constraint at Adnis. So let's wind that into the window now. Go all the way down to 10,000. There we go. I'm going to pop it into managed mode as well. I just want to see how VNav handles the descent, so we'll see how we get on. Down to the MCDU then, and let's put in our data for our arrival. So we'll hit the performance button, followed by next phase in the bottom right there, and that brings up our approach page. So we need to put our QNH in. So if we go back to our flight section and our arrival data, we can see we got winds 030 at 13 knots, cav OK, temperature 18 degrees, QNH 1022. So let's pop our QNH in then, 1022, there we go, and that goes in top left. Our outside air temperature was 18 degrees, so we'll drop that in. Our winds were 030 at 13 knots. So we can pop that in as well, so 030/13, and that goes in there. Our transition altitude is 6,000 feet, so I'll just tweak that, flight level 60, that's cool. We've got our approach ref, 143 knots. Moving across to the other side, we need to add our minimums, so back to our charts, so let's go to our arrival, ILS runway 25 left, and our minimums are 561 feet. So let's drop that in, so 561, that goes in the barrow, and for our landing config we will go flaps full. So that is our approach data all set. Right, so we're just a touch high on our profile. I'm just going to wind 18,000 into the window so I can see on the nav display if we're going to make our constraint at Zinla there, and we can see we're just about going to make that okay, so that should be fine. And I'm just going to pop it back into managed mode as well, let VNav handle the descent again, and it seems quite happy that it's going to make that constraint at Zinla, so that's all fine. Okay, so we're descending quite nicely. The plane's happy it's going to meet our constraint at Zinla, so let's wind 10,000 back in again. So we know we've got to be at Adnis at 10,000 feet, and at this point it's a pretty good time to hop outside and do a bit of sightseeing, I think, so I will catch you shortly. Okay, welcome back to the flight deck. We are approaching our Adnis waypoint. We've got about 7 nautical miles to go, and then we're going to be levelling off at 10,000 feet to make that altitude constraint at Adnis. So let's hop back to the EFB and we will check our approach chart, and I want to check our next altitude, which is going to be 4,000 feet, which is where we need to be to intercept the glide slope. So whilst we're here, we might as well brief our missed approach then. So We've got to climb direct to Frankfurt 290, then direct to Frankfurt 685, climbing on course 237 degrees to 5,000 feet, that's our missed approach altitude, turning left direct to Charlie Hotel Alpha at 5,000, max 250 knots. So basically turn left and then out to our hold at Charlie Hotel Alpha. And there's our 4,000 to intercept the glide. Okay, let's wind that 4,000 feet into the window then, so we know we're going to be at the correct altitude to intercept the glide slope. Right, let's take a close look at the nav display then and check out this arrival into Frankfurt. As you can see, we've got this series of waypoints followed by vectors, and you typically find that ATC would give you a direct to at one of these waypoints to bring us back down onto the runway. So we will fly out to Frankfurt 613 and then do a direct to 623 and then down onto runway 25 left. Okay, so that little chime there is the cabin crew letting us know that the cabin is prepared for our arrival. So that's all good. We'll just acknowledge that. So now we're through 10,000 feet, we can put some lights on. So runway turn-off lights on, landing lights on, and we will put the seatbelt signs on. And everything else in the overhead is looking pretty good. We'll give them a quick bong as well. And if we look out in front of us, we can also see the airfield there in the distance, just as we're turning in right now. So we haven't got too much further to go, making pretty good progress. Okay, quick look at the EFB then, and we can see our little blue plane is now approaching Frankfurt 613, which is where we're going to do our direct to 623 and turn in left for our final approach down onto runway 25 left. And if we quickly look at our approach chart again, we can double check our ILS frequency and course, which is 246 degrees and 111.15. So down to the MCDU and hit the RadNav button, and there we go, there's our ILS frequency 111.15 on a course of 246 degrees. So that all matches up with what we've got on the chart. Cool. So we're at 6,000 feet, about 2 miles from our Frankfurt 613 waypoint, and I'm just going to be a bit proactive and hop into vertical speed mode just to get us down to 4,000 feet in plenty of time for our final approach. So we can see on the PFD now we're in vertical speed mode. That's all looking good, and our rate of descent has increased. And we're also now through our transition altitude, and we're getting the flashing message to say go to local pressure. So we'll go local pressure on both captain's and first officer's side, and we are also now through our 613 waypoint, so we'll do our direct to, and we'll scroll down to Frankfurt 623, and just before we press insert, if we have a look at the nav display, you can see it plots a little yellow dotted line just to make sure we're happy with everything before we insert it. I'm good with that, so insert, and there we go, the plane will automatically start turning in left and continue to follow the flight plan. And we can also see the little blue arrow is where we're going to be levelling off at 4,000. So that's all looking good. And in fact, let's reduce our rate of descent a little bit as well, just to smooth it out. 500 feet per minute should be fine. And now the blue arrow is just pushed back a little bit. Good. Okay, so we're about to complete our turn onto our final approach. So we'll hit the localizer. And if we take a look at the PFD, we've got nav lock. So that's what we're looking for, and from here on in it's going to get quite busy. So let's start taking control of the speed. So we'll wind that down to 220 knots, which is where we need to be at our 626 waypoint. There we go. And I'm also going to engage our LS button for the ILS, and that now brings up a little message on our PFD, lets us know we're 23 miles to go, so we can monitor that. And we can also continue to reduce the energy in the plane now by going flaps 1, and whilst we're here, let's also arm our ground spoilers. And at this point we can also start thinking about setting our auto brakes for our landing, which we'll set to low. That should be fine for today. So auto brakes set to low. Here we go. And we'll just bring the range down on our nav display as we approach that final constraint. If I just zoom in a little bit, we need to be at flight level 40 and max 220 knots, which is what we have set. And at this point we'd speak to ATC and report that we're established, and they'd give us clearance to land, so we can press the approach mode button. There we go. And let's also hit the LS button for the first officer. And we can also engage AP2, which means we're fully configured for an auto land if required. If we look at our PFD, we've got AP1 and 2, Cat 3 dual, which means we're all set and ready to go. And there is Frankfurt in the distance. And I can also see just on the horizon there, visual on our runway there. So we've not got too much further to go. And let's continue bringing our speed down as well. Let's wind that back to 200 knots. There we go. And let's also go to flaps 2. Set. And I always say stable landings come from a really good stable approach. So let's stay ahead of the plane and continue winding our speed back nice and early. So we'll bring that down to 180 knots. There we go. Set. Right, another look at the PFD shows us that we have captured our glide slope. You can see the magenta diamond there, and the plane is starting to reduce its altitude with the glide. So we can enter our missed approach altitude of 5,000 feet. Set. And it's fairly common for ATC to give us an instruction of being at 160 knots until 6 DME. So let's wind 160 knots into the window. There we go. And if we just zoom in again on the PFD, we are 10 DME to go. So now's a pretty good time to get our gear down nice and early. So we'll go gear down. There we go. And we'll hop outside. And I'll never get sick of watching this animation. The city in the backdrop. That is fantastic. So cool. Okay, so our gear is down, we've got 3 green, our auto brake is set to low. Let's go flaps 3, set. And we're just approaching 6 DME to go then, so let's enter our approach ref, which was 143 knots, so let's wind that back to 143, set. And we'll go flaps full, which is our final stage of flaps. Ground spoilers are armed. And we now have our landing checklist on our ECAM, so landing gear down, signs on, cabin ready, spoilers armed and flaps full. And that is our landing checklist complete. A bit more sightseeing for you football fans. There's Eintracht Frankfurt's ground there. One of my favourite things to do in the sim, looking out for football grounds. Very cool. Okay then, let's focus up for our landing. We are all fully configured and stable on our approach.
1,000.
And that's 1,000 to go. I'm just going to leave it a little bit longer, and then I'm going to turn off the autopilot and hand fly our landing. So autopilot disengaged and my controls. And we've got some pretty nice conditions now. That sort of 13 knot crosswind has dissipated somewhat, which is nice. And I do have Aerosoft's Frankfurt Mega Airport scenery installed, which is pretty huge, and I've got to say it's running pretty smoothly so far. Not getting any stutters or anything, so I'm pretty happy with that.
300.
And that's 300 to go. Still got 2 whites, 2 reds on the pappies.
100 above.
Check.
200. Minimum.
Continue.
100.
100 to go. Eyes fixed on the touchdown zone.
50.
looking to the end,
40, 30,
and flare,
20, retard,
throttles idled,
45,
and touchdown. Auto brakes are on. Reverser's green. Now I just need to hug that centre line. I've missed that high speed exit, so we'll go for the next one. So manual braking, and we will exit here. Okay guys, welcome to Frankfurt. Right, I'm going to wrap it up there for today guys. That concludes part 3 of my Fenix A321 series for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I hope you enjoyed that landing. Be sure to check out parts 1 and 2 if you missed those, and if you did enjoy today's video, give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.